I'm Brian Wong, this is Edmunds, and we're here today with something that is neither borrowed nor blue, but that we are very much wedded to. This is our very red Jeep Wrangler Rubicon Unlimited, and it is a member of our long-term fleet. And I really want to put an emphasis on the word long because this is the longest tenured member of the Edmunds long-term fleet that we ever had. This is actually a 2018 model that we bought with our own money, and this vehicle also recently celebrated a big milestone, clicking over the 100,000 mile mark. So this vehicle has traveled more miles with us than any other vehicle that we've ever owned, and that's a bit surprising because we were actually ready to let it go when it crossed the 50,000 mile mark, and we even shot a wrap-up video and everything. But before we could let it go, our video team jumped in and they decided to save it because we were looking for a vehicle that had really good capability that we could use to help support many of our video shoots, especially the off-road shoots. And if you look at the videos that we've done over the past few years, especially anything that touches the dirt, you'll probably see this red Wrangler lurking in the background. So in this wrap-up video, we're going to tell you exactly what it's been like to live with a Wrangler for 100,000 miles, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And of course, we're going to tell you how much it actually cost us to keep this thing on the road, because with Wranglers, as we know, maintenance costs are always an issue. And we'll also tell you how much we might be able to sell this thing for at the end of its life with us. And, sorry accountants, I'm not quite sure how much we're going to be able to get back for this thing. So this is actually the third Wrangler that we've owned, but for this one, we decided to jump up to the Wrangler Rubicon Unlimited. And since it's a Rubicon, it's also pretty much the most capable Wrangler that you can buy off of the lot. We purchased this vehicle in March of 2018 in Las Vegas for about $53,000, and it's been in our garage ever since. Buying a 2018 Wrangler was a bit of a no-brainer because that was a really big year for Jeep. That was the year that the fourth generation Wrangler debuted, and it brought with it big changes to the powertrain. So it swapped out a very old, kind of antiquated transmission for an 8-speed automatic, and it came with a bunch of new creature comforts that made the Wrangler more livable than ever before. For example, this is the first Wrangler that you could actually get with a backup camera. So how has the Wrangler held up after 100,000 miles? And I would say that from a driving experience perspective, it's actually held up quite well. We've taken this thing all over the place. It's been to basically every off-road park that you can think of in Southern California to scout for shoots, and it's spent more miles in the dirt than we would even venture to say most Wranglers do, except for the most hardcore owners. This thing still feels just as confident in the dirt in year 5 as it did in year 1. You have all of this really great off-road hardware helping you out. You got front and rear lockers, disconnecting sway bar, you got 4 high and 4 low with a 2-speed transfer case, tons of suspension articulation. If you got one today off of the showroom floor, this thing can probably do just as many things as that one does, and it's still just an absolute joy to drive once the pavement ends.
I love the Jeep off-road. I can take it anywhere. It's a tank. Highly recommend.
Absolutely loved it in the dirt. Whenever you took it out, it could do anything. We used it a lot as a sport vehicle.
Loading gear in and out, running it all day in the hot and cold, going over rough and muddy terrain to get to different remote spots to set up equipment. It did great.
The test vehicles, we were taking them off-road, going over rocks. They were struggling with Jeep. Whoop, right over. No problem. Loved it.
That's where you can see where your money is spent. That thing is a blast. Super fun, can handle pretty much anything you throw at it, and you're gonna have a good time while you're doing it.
Now, as good as it is off-road, get this thing on-road, it's still a little bit uncomfortable. I would say that, Wranglers are kind of known for having a bit of play in the steering wheel, especially on the highway. So you do have to work and pay attention to keep it going straight. And the steering now does feel a bit looser on the road than it did out of the box. I've driven many other new Wranglers, and this one, it's got more wiggle in the wheel than those do, but even though it's not the easiest thing to keep straight down the highway, if you're paying attention and your hands are soft, it's doable for sure. It is extremely noisy on the highway still. Right now we have the hard top on, so when we bought this thing, we actually bought it with both a hard top and a soft top option. We put the soft top on for a little bit, but then took it right off because that thing was real loud. And even with the hard top on, at highway speeds especially, tons of wind noise. Not really an easy vehicle to have a conversation in just because you're getting noise from all directions.
The biggest problem for me with the soft top wasn't the temperature, it wasn't the noise, it was smells. Since that soft top lets in so much air, when you're driving around Los Angeles, you can just smell everything that is going on around your car. So I was really glad when we switched back to the hard top.
Okay. The screen now does feel a bit dated. This interior is still, I would say, nice for a Jeep, but that's because I have a bit of institutional memory of what Jeeps used to feel like back in the day. So this is still, you know, by Jeep standards, a pretty great interior to be in. The update that it got really kind of fixes a bunch of those things. It's got a much bigger screen now, more technology, but by Wrangler standards, still pretty nice in here. The only thing that kind of actually downgrades this Wrangler a little bit in our eyes is the fact that we bought a long-term Bronco, and the Bronco comes with an independent front suspension, and that makes that vehicle ride much better on the highway. And since that vehicle is newer, I would also say it has a much nicer interior and more comfortable seats as well. Given the amount of capability that you're getting, I think that the Wrangler still does not a good job on-road, but a passable one enough to where you have so much fun off-road that the on-road sins, you can kind of forgive them.
On the 405 freeway during rush hour traffic, I would rather be in almost anything else. The interior is not that comfortable, the ride's not that comfortable.
And it's also so loud in there, so you can't even have a conversation. So let's say you are driving and you have the ability that Bluetooth decides to work. I can't hear anyone. You know why? Because it's a Jeep and it's loud. The road noise is not awesome.
The cabin is so loud on the highway that I want to stick pencils in my ears and don't want to hear it ever again.
Absolutely hated it. It has that dead spot in the top, and you're always kind of keeping it in the lane constantly. It's almost like feeling like bumper cars. You're just staying inside the lines. It just drove me bonkers.
The loose steering, I don't mind. It's fine for me. It's a Jeep. It's gonna Jeep.
The seat bottom seems to slant forward like that, so I had to go to Pep Boys and jam a pad under my thighs so I could actually sit like a human being. So yeah, I hate it on road.
It's a little bit of a handful sometimes, but it's still fun.
Now let's get down to the fun part. Exactly how much did it cost us to keep this vehicle on the road for 5 years? And the unfortunate answer is quite a bit. Now for the first 2 years of ownership, it didn't really cost us that much at all, mostly because the vehicle was still under warranty. We had to get a couple of recalls fixed and 3 of the shocks had to be replaced, but we didn't pay for any of that. And in those first 2 years, it cost us only about $2,000 for a new set of tires and a new windshield. However, once it transitioned to its new role as a support vehicle, the cost went up exponentially. In the past 3 years, it's cost us over $8,000 to keep this Wrangler roadworthy, thanks to electrical problems having to do with the start-stop system, a dead alternator, another new windshield, and another new set of tires. On top of all these costs, it's had to be towed 3 times, and it's had to visit the dealership for service or repairs 8 times. So on top of all the money we've spent keeping it running, it's also spent a lot of time having to be fixed as well. Now we should note that this Wrangler has definitely lived a harder life than most. It's spent a lot of time off-road in pretty harsh conditions, and we've put a lot of miles on it. But then again, that's what it's made for, right?
I spent a ton of time and a lot of miles scouting locations in our Jeep. What was backcountry trails, dunes, dry lake beds, and that truck never, ever, ever quit on me on any trail, anytime off-road, never a problem. It just always broke down in my driveway.
I've driven a lot in the Jeep. I've taken 2 huge road trips from Los Angeles to Louisiana up to Chicago and back 2 times, and I actually really like how it rides.
I remember taking it on an off-road excursion, kind of an all-day thing with my kids, doing some light-duty trails, fire roads, things like that, a little bit of hiking. What I would say is anytime you remember a trip and you remember a vehicle as part of that trip, it means the vehicle is pretty special, and that is certainly the case with our long-term Wrangler.
Definitely found some trails and obstacles and stuff that looked a little bit sketchy, looked a little bit challenging. Jeep handled them no problem every time, made it easy.
I had to go down this giant rocky mountain and I was a little scared. Being in that thing for a beginner, total noob like myself, it made it so simple to just off-road, like somewhat big rocks. And it made me realize why people love off-roading so much and why people love Jeep so much.
Now that we're actually ready to sell the Wrangler for real this time, we took it to a dealership and had them do an inspection to see what items we might need to fix on it before we could sell it. And they came back with a long list that included about $4,000 worth of repairs. And we don't think that those are all repairs that we'll need to do to make it saleable, but there are some things that definitely need to get fixed. The rear glass, for example, the strut is broken, so it won't stay up. So if you ever want to get in the cargo bed, you got to hold it up with your other hand. The front visor is broken, so when you pull it down, it actually falls out completely. And our infotainment screen suffers from something called ghost finger. And if that sounds cool, it really isn't. It's actually very annoying. You get these kind of phantom touches, so you cannot be touching the touchscreen, but it's still pressing buttons and activating things, and it can actually even just call people. So if you have an ex-girlfriend in your phone book, maybe don't connect your phone to our Wrangler in particular. Okay, so now for the good part. How much will owning this Wrangler end up costing us in the end? If you remember, we bought it for just under $53,000 5 years ago. And in that time, we spent about 10 grand on repairs and maintenance. Now, getting some of the essential items fixed before sale, like the screen and the rear glass, that would cost just over $2,000. We actually brought the Wrangler in to get a trade-in offer, and that came back at $24,000. So if we add all of these things up, boop, 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 we end up with a total amount spent of about $65,000. And if we got $24K back on the trade, we'd end up at a total cost of $41,000 for 5 years of Wrangler ownership. For the Wrangler's last video, it wouldn't have been right to say goodbye to it in the city, so we've brought it here at the top of a ridge after a long, dusty trip up a hill where it can look out and see all of the off-road terrain that it's conquered along the way. Throughout this video, there's really just been one question that's been on my mind, and that is, are we going to miss the Wrangler when it's gone?
Will I miss the Jeep? Kind of.
Not specifically, not that vehicle, but I think Wranglers in general are really cool, and I always kind of want to own one at some point, or maybe lease one, considering all the problems we had with our long-term vehicle.
Personally, I'm not going to miss it, but I understand if others might.
I will miss it. I'm going to miss the Jeep because driving around Los Angeles, we have garbage roads, potholes everywhere, and guess what? I'm not going to fly out of the car or wreck it from driving over those. So the Jeep is great for that.
Am I glad that we had it? Absolutely.
And to me, the answer is an emphatic yes. While it's by no means a perfect vehicle, we're sort of in this era where generalists are winning the day. All of our top-rated vehicles are that way because they're good at kind of everything. But the Wrangler, it's really only good at one thing, and that singular focus is where it derives its appeal. It was made to be good off-road. It is great off-road. And you know what? Maybe it's not great in the city, maybe it's not great on the highway, but you forgive it after you drive it somewhere like this. Now, we will miss it, but that's also because we're not really paying for it. And on the way up here, I hit a big bump and that visor popped off and it almost hit me in the face. So it did remind me that the people who pay the bills, they might actually be happy to see it go because yes, this Wrangler has cost a lot to maintain. But at the end of the day, I think if you were to ask our staff, we would say, yeah, we're gonna miss the old girl when she's gone.
Sum the Jeep up in one word or line.
I would say scrappy.
Cool.
It means well.
If you like fixing your car a lot, get a Jeep. If you like running over things, get a Jeep. If you like spending a lot of money on your car, get a Jeep.
So now that the Wrangler is actually going to be leaving us, we're gonna have to replace it with something to be our new support vehicle. And what do we even have in our fleet that's nearly as capable? Oh.
I used to live my life one trail at a time, and so did you. I think that's why we were brothers, because you did too.